Okay. So for the agenda for today, we're going to discuss some of the topics listed in the issue. Alvaro had listed a bunch of questions. So as for enterprise option, we think it's an option. We're still trying to figure out pricing. So I am meeting with them at 11 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow. They set up a meeting. Pat's going to join me. So we're going to talk to them tomorrow, find out what the pricing is, and I guess get more of an overview of what they have to offer. So if there are any questions or anything we should ask them, please feel free to let us know. You can add the questions here.
What in the enterprise version would actually be an advantage?
Pat can probably speak better to that.
Yeah, I think the main thing that we probably would want to have is the shard rebalancing, which is only a feature of the enterprise, and the ability to pin tenants to a shard. So I think if enterprise is not an option, I don't know that it's going to meet our requirements, kind of what we had talked about previously.
Sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time. So was that the only thing, was the tenant rebalancing, Pat? I thought there was another feature too that we were looking at.
Yeah, there's also this Citus MX, which is kind of an additional product, which is enterprise only, which we had sort of looked at because it improves the high availability situation. I'm not sure if that would, we haven't really tested that to know if that would be a good fit, but that's another enterprise only feature that definitely something we would want to look at.
What was that called again?
Citus MX.
Okay. So Alvaro, you probably missed the first part of it. We're having a meeting with Microsoft effectively tomorrow to talk about Citus Enterprise and get some licensing questions from them. So if you have any questions that you'd like for us to ask them, feel free to just add them here.
Oh, okay. I actually have a question, but it's for GitLab. So what is the policy here? From what I understand, the usual policy is that whatever that lands on GitLab.com should end up landing sooner or later on the product. Now, in this case, how does it fit under a non-open source solution, and or relative to the next topic, how is going to affect the licensing if it's open source product? So in other words, is it planned that whatever lands on the .com, in this case, sharding, is going to land in the product too? And if so, where is this a proprietary license or a given open source license takes in here? This is the part I'm a little bit not completely understanding.
As we've talked about, I don't think we have any plans of introducing sharding to non-GitLab.com. Basically, none of the enterprise customers that I am aware of are big enough to even justify sharding at all. Like,
yeah, that was also my expectation, but in this case, why it would make sense the licensing, the ATPL licensing, as it is in the one of the next items.
Well, we won't be introducing Citus to regular on-prem users. It would be something that we support as a protocol, but if enterprise customers want to use Citus, they can, but they don't. It's not going to be something we ship by default.
Okay. So then, because I saw Sid comments on this issue regarding the licensing. So what I'm trying to understand then is, so if we opt for enterprise, it wouldn't be a problem. If we opt for the open source license, which is ATPL, and then some enterprise customers ask for this, they may be seeing some reluctance in this case.
I guess I haven't seen Sid's comments, but to me, this is something that is GitLab.com specific. Sharding is completely unnecessary for on-prem customers, simply because GitLab.com is several orders of magnitude bigger than any on-prem customer.
To be clear, I've been advocating for a long time that solutions that apply for GitLab.com do not need to apply necessarily to the product too. So I'm totally on that line. But basically, Sid comment is in one line summary is saying that some enterprise customers may not like the AGPL license. And then I'm wondering why this is an issue or might be an issue if they need not to be using this.
Yeah, they wouldn't. It wouldn't matter. They don't because they wouldn't be getting this feature.
Okay.
This is a platform. This is a platform difference, not a product code difference.
Okay, that is what my expectation anyway.
Yeah.
So from that perspective,
it's the same as GitLab.com runs Camo proxy, or you know we run an elk stack. Like these are things that make GitLab.com work, but aren't necessary for on-prem customers.
Okay. Well, on the database side, the message has been a little bit different, which is we try not to do anything that may not land on the product side, and we are making different decisions based on this concern, which I don't necessarily agree with because it's limiting us. It's limiting us based on this future expectation. I would like to have more freedom in that regards because GitLab.com definitely agree needs different solutions and its orders of magnitude from the largest enterprise customer. Just guessing on this side, but you know it obviously needs different solutions. Okay, so
yep.
We're hands-free here regarding to the use of proprietary, non-proprietary, and licensing. That's I understand if I got it correct.
Yes, as long as we don't make changes to the code base that make it so that it's not possible to run with straight up normal Postgres for an on-prem customer, should be fine.
Okay, got it.
That's a good clarification to make, and it might change the way we're actually writing some of the things that we're working on. So thank you for bringing that up. Surprise. So next one was licensing. I think from what I was reading about the Affero licensing, it may take the the Citus community offering off the table. You know, if Sid's concerned about it, and a bunch of articles I read about it said it's questionable whether or not you need to open up your servers if you're using something with Affero licensing. So the Citus community may be a non-starter for us. Something we probably need to look into a little further.
On this regards, there's actually a lot of confusion around this, and my personal take, if I may bring it to the table, is that the concerns about GPL or copyleft licensing do apply to libraries. If you're building a product and you use a library, and this library is GPL, that means that your whole product needs to be GPL in order to be compliant. Even at some point, this might be acceptable for you. Maybe the library will integrate in the future into a proprietary product, and you don't want to open up everything. And that's why legal departments are concerned about GPL licenses. So it makes sense for libraries. Now, for a product that you don't integrate as a part of the same entity, as a component, as a linked component from the software perspective, it's just as a component you're talking over the network or anything like that. I would say AGPL or GPL are as free as anything else, and you can do whatever you want with them. You don't need to make your own software GPL or copyleft for that matter. And they, of course, enjoy the freedoms of open source definition. So from that perspective, I would believe that as long as this is not a library, and this is not a library, any GPL or AGPL license should be more than fine in this case. Actually, technically speaking, AGPL also expands this virality over the network, but the drivers you're using, which are the components you're actually embedding in your application, they're not GPL. The drivers are very liberally licensed. So this breaks the chain basically. So from that perspective, there should be no risk at all from using any GPL or AGPL product. Actually, GitLab is using Linux, was using MySQL before. All of those are GPL licensed, and there's no issues in that. So I think should be only a concern for libraries, if at all. Some people are not either concerned.
I think we'd probably have to engage legal on this one to make sure that we're not opening ourselves up, right? Just to be safe.
Yeah, actually, on the GitLab acceptable licenses page, this is already addressed. And the limitation specifically applies to libraries. So it's clearly stated as libraries, yet it still says that in general, it's better to check with legal or request some approval. But it is designed the same way as I'm proposing, which is based for libraries. For non-libraries, just components you're using, yours should be more than fine. I mean, my opinion, my take on this is you're more than fine.
Pat, what are your thoughts on, do you think community, if we can't get enterprise, is community still valuable for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest feature that we had talked about is the shard rebalancing, which I think that's a feature that we sort of all agree that we would probably want to have.
But we could possibly write our own.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that we could develop some other solution around that. We would have to look into what that would be or how that would fit in with Citus.
But so the tenant rebalancing is in enterprise. If we can't afford enterprise or we can't use enterprise for whatever reason, and we wanted to build our own, would Citus help accelerate that, or would it be just as hard to write our own without Citus?
I mean, I think at that point, if we're building that from scratch, I don't know how much. I mean, we're going to get other advantages still from using Citus, but as far as the rebalancing piece, I think that would be basically building it from scratch.
Okay. Thanks. All right.
So, in my opinion, Citus open source version has several shortcomings compared to the enterprise version. So this shard rebalancing, MX, tenant isolation, and a few others that I noted on the GitLab issue, there are limitations, significant limitations. My concern is whether we can actually use Citus as a solid base for developing these features on top of it, or it's going to be really hard because it's already developed in one way and we cannot do it in another way. Of course, the opposite side of the spectrum, which I've been posting at some point, I would recommend to consider, which is the homegrown solution. There might be some differences there. In a homegrown solution, you might opt for an approach where you don't have coordinators. Just go directly, the applications understand the sharding algorithms and they talk directly to the shards, in which case things are architecturally significantly different. And in this case, the cost of effort may be different, lower or higher, but maybe significantly different. That's why I recommend the analysis in this point.
Yeah. So part of the reason we started this working group was to also help with the scalability of the database, right? We talked initially about the application sharding approach, but we focused this working group on just the database sharding piece of it so we could have that horizontal scaling at the database. We still have some ability to vertically scale because we're not at the maximum provision server for the database, but before we get to that point, they wanted to have an option to be able to scale out the database horizontally. So that was the focus of the group. The application sharding's not off the table, but it's not the focus of this right now. Although, I mean, if we make a justification for it, if we hit enough of a stumbling block, it's something we could certainly consider, but it's not the primary focus at the moment.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I just think, let me rephrase my term. By application-based sharding, I don't mean like splitting into microservices. Yes, this is definitely a viable approach, an approach I would also recommend looking at, but it definitely requires significant changes to the application architecture. It's more longer term. What I mean by application-based sharding, and maybe my term is not very precise, is things like what Google or Facebook have been doing, which is horizontally scale the database, exactly like we're talking with Citus. But instead of connections going to a coordinator and this coordinator distributing, or fleet of coordinators distributing the load across the shards, that the application knows which shard it needs to connect to get the data that it's asking for. And in this case, the application picks the shard directly because the application is smarter and understands the shard it needs to connect to. And we avoid the middleware that are the coordinators. So this is potentially more high performance, lower latency. We don't introduce potential failures derived from coordinators. But of course, the application needs to be more complex because it needs to understand all the sharding and how to perform if there's queries that need to address several shards at once, which is actually the toughest problem. But this approach is the approach that has been used by the large social networks. I guess we're several orders of magnitude still up from them, but this is the approach they have taken in the past. And at the cost of increasing application complexity and or having kind of a local proxy sitting next to the application, which has this intelligence. If this would not be wanted to do directly in the application, then you have this other trade-offs. So I'm sure it will be more complex at the end of the day, more development effort, but performance and reliability should be higher, and flexibility definitely should be higher, because then you can shard or reshard, rebalance as however you want.
Yeah. I wonder if it's a logical next step, right? Or if it's more work. So if we go with Citus Enterprise and we go with the coordinator the way it is out of the box. I know we talked about creating our own HA coordinator, which sounds like an interim step to what you're talking about. So starting with single coordinator and seeing where the lack of efficiency is, or if there's any problems with it, and then moving to an HA coordinator, and then maybe to application sharding, which you're effectively talking about, or if those are competing interests and it's not going to be super productive to follow that path.
I think they're a bit competing. First of all, because the application, so let's maybe label it different, but where I'm calling application sharding, let's call it maybe coordinator less. It should not require a coordinator, right? So the application talks directly to the shard, either because there's application code that understands sharding, or because there's a proxy, but it's sitting next to the application. It could be like a sidecar from that perspective. So this, let's call it for now coordinator less. I don't know if it's a precise term. This may change the way you shard, this may change the way you reshuffle, and this may avoid the need for a HA coordinator, which other than proof of concepts, I would strongly recommend, because otherwise coordinator becomes a point of failure.
Can I ask something? The moment you have, not all your tables are partitioned or sharded, don't you need a coordinator? So you have some tables that cannot be sharded. So at that moment, you need a coordinator. So we will have to build from scratch everything that is provided by Citus. Or am I wrong?
So strictly speaking, what you need is the same as Citus does, which is those tables that are not sharded are replicated. And then you'll have a copy of all these tables in all the different shards. And for these, we could use exactly the same technology that Citus is using, which comes with Postgres 10 and is this logical replication, right? So the same technology, maybe theirs is a little bit more integrated into the product itself, but technology is there to be able to replicate logically these tables that are called replicated tables. The difference will come if a given query needs to not only query replicated tables, that will be more than fine, but if they need to go cross shards. So if a given query may involve more than one shard, yes, in that case, then you'll start needing to replicate the functionality of the coordinator and maybe do it application side. But in these cases, what should be done is to try to understand the shape of the queries that you're doing and whether those queries are actually hitting a single shard or they're hitting several shards. The theory, which is world is never perfect, but the theory is that OLTP applications are typically record-based or related record-based, in which case they gather information from a single shard. And then it's more like OLAP applications or data warehousing, where you pick data from many shards because you're doing a lot of data gathering, which may happen at a separate stage. And now I know there's Snowflake right now, so it might happen at that stage where you aggregate everything, but it requires a deep analysis. So there's large trade-offs here: exchange flexibility, potentially more performance, and higher throughput, plus this extra effort if there's need to do cross-shard queries, which I don't know, versus more abstraction, but with less potential flexibility.
Sorry, I'm not even sure what to put for an answer there. That was thank you. Very detailed
Me neither as of
explanation.
now.
All right. So as for DDL migrations, is that covered with our last conversation here? Sorry, what's a DDL migration? Alvaro?
Well, I mean, based on what Citus does, so they use 2PC, two-phase commit for this. Two-phase commit is slow protocol, but it's safe. It's consistent, strongly consistent from a distributed systems perspective. So that's okay. The concern here is that right now migrations are becoming a bottleneck for the database. They're being slow. They're creating a huge load on the database, yet we want them to be transactional. If now we switch to 2PC for doing DDL migrations, I cannot foresee what the impact could be. Maybe it's just a little bit more overhead, or maybe everything blows up. So this requires deeper thought, testing, and potentially anyway, talking to the engineering team that is actually causing these migrations to understand why they need to do so many migrations. The volume of migration seems high to me, and maybe it could be reduced.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. There are a couple issues out there where we are trying to push back on when they are doing migrations, or notifying engineers of when they're doing migrations that will be large and painful and slow, right? And ask them to figure out alternatives to that. I will dig up the issues for those.
In general, and by the way, this is totally off topic, but databases are happier if you try to do operations that are more kind of append only versus heavy updates or heavy deletes, right? Of course, you can do updates. Of course, you can do deletes. But the less updates and deletes you do, the more inserts to simulate that you do, the database is happier, and in all levels. So
yeah, we do far too many migrations right now, and we're trying to, I guess, lasso that in, coordinate a little better on that. So I will link those issues here. But thanks for bringing that up. See concerns over the long-term sustainability of Citus. No idea. I guess those are good questions I can ask tomorrow when we have the meeting.
It looks like that for the enterprise version, if they're gonna start selling it actually today, from what you said last time, as an SKU, that should be a message that, from that perspective, the enterprise version has long-term sustainability. So the question may be about the open source version. Microsoft seems to be very committed to open source right now, so may not be a big concern, but still worth to ask if you're going to talk with them.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find. Yeah, sorry. No, it's buried in my email somewhere. But yeah, they said they're trying to put it in their enterprise architect SKU. So I'll share all the notes from the meeting when it's done tomorrow. All right, we have 3 minutes. So one of the things that we've been asked as a team to come up with goals by the end of 12/10 for what we're doing with Citus. And Pat and I talked a bit about this yesterday. There's still some things, we still have some dependencies, right? So still waiting on a way, or trying to find a way to import data so we can have a realistic data set. Pat's got the Citus cluster set up with a coordinator and 3 servers, if I recall correctly. The cost we'll figure out tomorrow. Functionality we've already outlined a bit on what functionality we like from enterprise. Pat, what are your thoughts about scheduling a demo? Some folks were interested to see what Citus could do for us in form of a demo.
I guess, what kind of demo are we talking about?
I don't know. Just demonstration of functionality. I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard to demonstrate something like this, right? Because it's basically like, here's GitLab on Citus. It still does the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, even the app doesn't run in its current form, so I think there's like pieces of it that we could show, but that would be a pretty big migration effort to do that.
Yeah. Well, we still have a couple weeks before 12/10, so think about it. Maybe there's something interesting we could show from a demo standpoint. Maybe some of the enterprise features, bouncing tenants around. I don't know. Just something to think about. It's been requested. So, cool. All right. I have about 1 minute left. Any other topics we need to follow up on? All right. We'll take that as a no. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.